Tim, and welcome to Collector Conversations. Sometimes I interview guests and they're princes, they're financiers, they're the heirs to fabulous fortunes. But today, we've got a man who loves his cars, watches, and motorcycles. He's a Jersey boy, born and bred. He's a school vice principal. He's all of us. Eric, welcome to the show.
Tim, thank you so much for having me.
Now, this is going to be a good time, but I think we have this term, eBay seller story, that circulates in the industry where people tell tall tales about watches. It's older than eBay. Tell us yours.
It starts with this watch right here. It's a Rado, and it's a great piece because it's my father's piece. And there's the interesting story behind this is my father, who emigrated here from Germany with my mom and my older brother in 1958. He won that in a sales contest, right? And this is 1958. He's here in 1957, 56. He allegedly won this sales contest, right? Which I have no doubt he won, because my dad has a gift of speaking and selling, and he would sell a lot of stuff when Germany started rebuilding back after the war. But the legend on this one is his friend Schneider, Herr Schneider, Mr. Schneider, is that this was salvaged off a shipwreck in the cargo department of the Andrea Doria.
So it survived the trip down.
Yes.
It made it back to the surface. It's still running.
Yes, and the only thing that was replaced was the plexi, or the crystal, had to be replaced because of the pressure. Now, Rado, as you had mentioned before, founded a company in 1957.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know how much Mr. Schneider was selling.
Because the ship sank in 1956.
Correct. 1956, 1957, bestowed upon my father for his excellent salesmanship, and this was gifted to him by Herr Schneider. So I don't know if any of that story checks out, but what I do know is that is my father's watch, has very much sentimental meaning to me, and this has never been serviced since my father has it. And if you notice, it's still ticking right now. It's still ticking. And it holds fairly accurate time. So that's a testimony right there to the quality of the Rado watch if it's been 60-some years.
Yeah, go Rado.
Yeah.
Great story. It survived the ravages of years, if maybe not the depths as well.
Correct.
That's a fun piece. But
yeah.
And what's interesting to me that that's not really the beginning of your passion for watches. It started in the 70s, and it started in a maybe unusual place by modern standards.
Yes. In the 70s, 1976, 77, digital watches, all the rage. I was going to bring it today. The band does not fit my wrist. The backing unglued. You can't get it to work. In hindsight, I probably should have brought it. But all I wanted for Christmas was a digital watch.
Like a Hamilton Pulsar type
Texas
thing.
Instruments. And you had to press it for it to work. And you saw the time. And for a 10-year-old boy in New Jersey, waking up that Christmas morning and seeing that digital watch, well, that was Christmas. That was Christmas. And that watch, still to this day, I have, doesn't work. And my brother, who can fix anything, okay, we can't get the adhesive to stay on it, but it remains a fond memory of my childhood and my first foray, if you will, into what later became a passion.
So no longer a watch, but a valued keepsake.
Yes.
Now, you've had a lot of careers. You've been in IT, you've been in sales, you've worked food, nightclubs. Tell me when you came back to watches, because through this journey, you somehow refocused on time-telling much, much later on.
Yes. During my first career, which I could describe as sales, recruiting, foods, is I had this epiphany to change careers, and I became a teacher. I became a special education teacher. And during that time, before then, excuse me.
What year is this, roughly speaking?
I became a teacher in 2002.
So long after the 70s, long after that initial dalliance with LED time.
Yes, yes. And through one of my previous careers, I was familiar with the brand Montblanc. and they made fabulous pens. Fabulous pens. And I bestowed a pen upon my former boss. And there was a little ulterior motive because, well, guess what? I got the favorable shifts for maybe that pen. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, and he was a good soul. He was a good man. So I gave him the Montblanc pen. Later on, I'm at the local jewelers, and I happened to come across that watch. And it was almost, I knew the brand, I knew the quality, I looked at it, and I loved it. I liked the tiny etching over there that has the Mont Blanc.
Oh, yeah.
Right here on that side, right? And I loved the heft of it.
It's weighty.
It was 41.5 millimeters. It looked good on my wrist. And I didn't know anything about cards or boxes or papers or any of that. I just knew it was a cool watch with a brand that I trusted to buy the most expensive pen I have ever purchased in my entire life to this day, okay? And that was my first watch, automatic Swiss, and I would probably say that may have been, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago?
Now, what I find interesting is that you're a very emotional buyer. You find what you like.
Oh, yeah.
If you feel like you're getting value, you pull the trigger. This watch, no box, no papers, but it looked right and it felt right.
Yes.
And it struck you.
Yes.
So now tell me a little bit, because you've hung on to this one, but I think all of us have made mistakes in our collecting journey. Tell me about some of your sidetracks before you return to the path.
Wow. If you counted, I can't even, even bringing in these watches on my present collection was like, which do you bring? Which watch do you bring? It's like choosing what friends you're going to invite to your party or what guests you're going to invite to your wedding.
Or who's going to be in the, groomsmen party, in the wedding party.
All of it. All of it is like, well, who makes the cut? So when I talked to one of your producers, Garrett, it was like, no more than 8. And I'm like, oh, geez, 8. I have 60 some, and what about this one and the story on the Texas Instruments, and what about the non-mechanical that have sentimental value in this one, and they're all milestones. But during all those collectives, right, of the collections, there are so many mistakes that you make and you buy and you overpay, or you realize it's not what you want. And I've probably, if I have 50 or 60, maybe 40 of those, if I kept all of them, would be over 100. And of those, you buy them, it's too big for the wrist, it's too small for the wrist, and it would be too many to talk about and too many brands to go, whether it be a TAG Heuer, or like we talked about earlier, it was a Breitling Le Mans 24.
Yes, the 24-hour watch.
Great theory. Love it. I'm never going to drive Le Mans for 24 hours, right? Nor am I going to confuse AM to PM. And every time you look at it, it's a quick glance, right? And you had it like plus 12, minus 12, and it became confusing. So despite me getting a pretty good deal on that Breitling, I found it to be very ineffective to tell time, at least based on my brain power on any given particular day.
But we learned these lessons. It doesn't look right. It looked different on the internet. It wasn't the same in person. It wasn't my style. It wasn't easy to read. But we live and we learn, and we kind of evolve taste-wise. And so you bailed on the Le Mans 24, but not on Breitling, because now, here we have the Navitimer right here.
Love it.
Loved at first sight?
Yes. Yeah. That watch to me, this is an older version. I know they changed the bracelet recently, where now it's satinated and then it's polished, and it's kind of back and forth with that. I actually prefer the mirror-like finish on the older one. I also like the older B for the Breitling and maybe the indices. It just looks to me, that watch, I know it's a classic. I bought it for a reason. Love the color, love the watch, love the heft. One of my favorite watches.
Yeah, really, and I'll be honest, there's a theme here, with the exception of 2 very notable exceptions. Sports watches on bracelets, is that intentional or did it just work out that way?
Intentional. I prefer bracelets. I'm outside for my job a lot during recess and lunch times. Sometimes it's a little warm in the spring and the summer, and the leather to me just feels sometimes it's a little cleaner with the metal.
It gets muggy.
Yeah, it gets muggy. Sometimes if you sweat, I just prefer the stainless. I have very few, if any. These might be the only two of the Swiss mechanicals that actually are on a leather band, and the TAG Monaco is, well, because that's iconic.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, we were saying a lot of guys who are in watches, they're into cars, they're into motorcycles, they're into racing. They've got a lot of the same preoccupations, and I think the guy behind this watch is the reason many people buy it. Tell me a little bit about that.
Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen, the king of cool, chose that watch, right? He had legends, 3 watches in front of him, and he chose that one, which I think maybe Heuer was even surprised that
because it was a weird-looking watch in its day.
Correct. And the reason that watch, to me, resonates is out of all the watches I wear, and kids notice everything. Students notice everything, okay? They'll know, and they'll say, I like that watch over there. I like that watch, Dr. K. And I get more compliments on that, okay, than I probably do on most, because of the uniqueness of the dial. It catches, it's something different, and I think that's probably why it's one of my favorite. It's a left-handed crown on that, but the association with the racing, Steve McQueen, motorcycles, cars, I mean, it doesn't get much cooler.
And you got that Gulf racing style combination of white and red and blue. It's just so sexy.
Yeah.
Now
Red and blue.
You took the tough way through. You started in special education, tough kids. You mentioned that keeping everyone on time, like to the second, was a major part of what you did. Tell me a little bit more about how the watch sort of, I guess, melded with this unusual career path you took. Because you do use the watch in education.
Yes. I must look at my watch on any given day over 100 times, maybe 200. I wouldn't begin to tell you, because the bell is every period, okay? So every first period, 8:17. Not 8:17, it's 8:17 and 6 seconds, okay? Because it's what the school clock says. So everything is very much in tune, almost like a synchronized swimming thing, where everything, and sometimes when you have recess and lunch, the times are paramount, because you have to get 200 kids out, 200 kids in, lunch in, recess out, and it has to go. So literally, if you were on our lunch duty or recess duty, I would have a walkie, and I would literally say, Tim, you copy? Exactly at 12:51:30, hit the doors. And those doors would be open, so the kids could then travel out safely and then return back to the building.
And it's important because time is a big component of discipline, and you are a vice principal, not a principal, so you have to be the bad guy sometimes. And time's important. Being precise is important.
Yeah, and the kids I have, public school, okay, back when I first started, it was only a special education school. That was back when I first started in 2002, and then I became a public school educator, special education, so the kids were kind of not quite as challenging as perhaps my first foray into the educational system. And now, as a vice principal, you have, the good fortune to deal with all the kids. And there are very few kids. And the big thing is there really aren't bad kids. There's sometimes bad behavior. But the time structure, okay, and the structure of time helps greatly. Because whether it be, when is this class over? When is the assembly over? When is recess over? When is lunch over? I can tell them the exact second, because it's calibrated to their clock that child is watching every single day.
It's not the number on your phone, it's the number on the clock.
No, it's not it can't be, because this is actually off. Okay, this is on. This is spot on to school time. And it's wild with the accuracy of the mechanical movements timed in if I wear them consecutively on a daily basis, but they keep excellent time, and that 6 seconds makes all the difference when you're trying to get kids out safely through 2 doors.
Now, it's interesting to me that you do have an awful lot of sports-style watches, but they do run the gamut. I see everything from Grand Seiko to IWC. We've got our French Swiss, we've got our German Swiss, we've got the best of Japan. Tell me a little bit about, I guess we'd call this the odd men out, because this is from the other side of the world. It is very different, both in origin and in technology. Spring Drive GMT.
Yep. Love that watch. Again, love at first sight. Love at first sight. I have a wonderful jeweler, and he was able to procure that for me. That is a limited edition of 1,500 pieces. This, when I saw it, when the article first came out, I saw it and I asked for it, and he was able to get that for me. This looks better in person than anything I saw online. The bezel on that,
sapphire capped.
Oh my Lord. And the blue, the way the light catches that blue, even in this studio, is mesmerizing. Outside, it's even more, okay? The whole bezel is loomed, okay? The dial is like that snowflake that Grand Seiko is known for, but the best thing about that is when you watch that hand glide around, it's probably the smoothest movement I have, and I love that watch. The mirror and the Zaratsu finishing on that are stunning.
And that really is something that's different about Grand Seiko. The hands are exhaustively finished and assembled by hand. The cases are polished manually.
Yeah, I love that Grand Seiko. I don't know if they get the respect that they deserve from a craftsmanship. I think that might be one of my finer watches that I have.
Yeah, and this was a 2022 edition, 20 years of the Spring Drive GMT, a really special piece, and I do see what you mean with that bezel. Just like a 50 Fathoms, when you've got a sapphire cap on a bezel, you can do all sorts of things with the materials, and they're safe.
Yeah. Really
fun piece. Also a man after my own heart, because not only do you have the IWC Pilot Watch Chronograph, but you got it in green.
Yes. Green, correct me if I'm wrong, British Racing Green. Is that what they call that?
British Racing Green, yeah.
Yeah, that is the green. I've always, again, you talk about mistakes,
yes.
Okay? Colors are difficult, you know that.
Especially when you're looking at watches online.
Yes. And as we talked off camera before, I just purchased another one that's red. We'll see if we like the red. This green, that was the green. I had another Rado that was green. That wasn't the green. I had a Breitling that was green. That wasn't the green. Okay, mistake 1, mistake 2. They're great watches. It's a beautiful watch. But that was the green. And the problem, or the things I've learned with that, is we have these things called placeholders, right? Well, I can't get this because they don't make this in a 43. A couple of years ago, the 41 was first, right?
Yes.
And then the 43 came. I could live with a 41, but I really wanted the 43. But you know what? Let me get this instead. One thing I can tell you as a collector, wait for the piece that you want.
Yes.
Wait for the piece that you want, because it won't scratch that itch. And so 1 green down, Rado, 2 green down, Breitling, 3 green down, now that I'm thinking, Bulova, okay, and I probably had 4 or 5 more trying to find that green that I wanted, all the time knowing it was that one, and that is one of my favorites, not only for the green, but the legibility on that. I don't have my glasses on.
Instrument style, it's a pilot's watch.
I can see what time it is right down to the minute, and that's with these old eyes watching this from here.
You guys could probably read it from there too. Now, what you said about getting the right watch, how it scratches the itch, so true. I always say never settle. Because if you buy the watch that's almost the one you want, then you are doomed to buy that watch, reject it, and wait until you can find the one you really wanted. You wind up buying 2 watches, or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
Or more, or 4 or 5. And that's been, especially with the colors, the green, the red, the oranges now. Let's take, for instance, I have a beautiful, I was going to include it in today's collection, it might be a Gen 2 Planet Ocean with the orange aluminum
lovely
bezel.
Orange bezel.
Oh, it's fantastic. Fantastic bezel. But they can't duplicate that in the ceramic, or have yet to, right? So you don't get you have to get the exact color you want. You have to have it in your hand, look at the color, and then don't settle.
And it's just like with motorcycles, it's just like with cars. If what you really want is a manual transmission Corvette, and someone gives you a good deal on a nearby automatic, and you buy it, you get in, you're like, this is not what I wanted. You're going to buy that car, wind up selling it at a loss, and you're going to go out and you're going to get a manual transmission Corvette.
Yep.
Or you're going to get a shovelhead Harley Davidson. You're going to get what you originally wanted.
Yep. And I mean, you know, that not settling, like, and I've bought many things lickety-split. And one of them, we spoke of motorcycles earlier. I bought a Moto Guzzi V7 Racer, 2013 chrome tank. Mistakenly sold it. And like many other motorcycles and many other cars and many other watches, there's ones that you wish you didn't sell. And that bike was one of them because it had a chrome gas tank, and that was the one. And there's many watches that I've seen or come across, it's instantaneous. But you know. And when you settle, it just cost me 3 watches.
It's cheaper to just wait and get the thing you want, whether that means wait until it becomes available or wait until you've got the money. It's always advisable. And I guess if you've got a collection, you've got other watches to keep you company in the meantime. Though admittedly quite a spread, this is the odd man out. A sports watch, full bracelet, yes, so it's consistent with your taste, but the Cartier Santos Large is the most unusual watch among the ones you've purchased. How did this grab you?
I was going to bring the Cartier tank. I was hemming and haw over the tank versus the Santos. And I love them both. In the end, I chose the Santos. I like the story behind it. I like the
dirigible pilot, Louis Cartier, the turn of the century.
1904, needs the watch. I have to do both. I have to watch this time and fly, and all that thing came kind of before the tank, right?
Yes.
And classic, just a classic look. And it's like, even when you look at that from across the room, you know exactly what it is. It's not the blue Santos, it's not the green, it's the opaline, silver white, that shade where that, and the Cartier is written ever so delicately.
Right down there at 7, yeah.
Correct. And it's one of those watches where the uniqueness of it, it just, again, that was instantaneous. That was the one. I later bought the Cartier tank, but the brushed finish of the band and the exposed screws, that to me is a stylish watch, dress watch, or maybe even with a pair of jeans. You know, I generally wear that with a shirt and a tie, but love the bezel, love everything about it. Yeah, it was a natural choice.
Really cool piece. And you know, it's interesting. You do have a lot of watches that have great stories behind them. Steve McQueen, Louis Cartier, and Alberto Santos Dumont, the Breitling Navitimer, the circular slide rule, Zaratsu finish and the hand polishing, the snowflake dial, the spring drive that makes Grand Seiko unique. You know, you've got British racing green, your admiration for cars. And then you've got this Omega Speedmaster here. Was it the lure of space, aerospace, the moon? Was this, what drew you to this? Was it the story or was it something more personal?
The story, classic watch, first watch, you know, worn on the moon. I was like, okay, I was like, I know, and it's on the back. My biggest choice on that one was Hesalite versus Sapphire. That was I was hemming and hawing like any other good collector, sandwich Sapphire or the Hesalite. And I knew I liked the watch because it's classic. Yes. So when you look through some of the pieces in my collection, some of them are classic, iconic, if you will, and some of them are just fun, right?
Yes.
Some of them fun. That is iconic, classic, forever, always known. Hesalite, the reason why I chose Hesalite, to me, and I had them side by side, it looks warmer. It looks warmer to me, and it just makes it look a little more, I know it's true to the original, and you know, the reason why they chose Hesalite, but to me, it just looks better in Hesalite as it does a Sapphire. Although I do appreciate the open case back, and I love seeing the movements, the dial on that sold me. So that's why I chose that particular piece. Classic model, love the look, always in style, and the Hesalite to me just makes it look a little bit more true to the original and warmer for some reason.
Yeah, there's an authenticity there, but also there's that romance of knowing when you look at it off angle and you get that thermoplastic distortion.
Yep.
That's what Neil saw 20 seconds before liftoff. That's exactly what he saw.
Yep. Yep.
So now, having come to watch collecting relatively late in life, you've learned a lot about your tastes. You made some mistakes, you've had some wins, you know your keepers, but you know, we always have that next car, that next watch, that next motorcycle, that's the next peak, because you never truly scale Olympus. You work your way up, but you never reach the end. Where does your journey as a collector go? Either the next watch on the list, or maybe a Grail watch even?
Well, as I was walking in here, there are certainly a lot of watches here in which to consider.
Physically here.
Physically
at
here.
1916, yeah.
Physically here that could be considered my next Grail watch that are just stunning. And, you know, whether it be FP Journe or other brands. And I'm just like any other collector, the worst thing perhaps, or the best thing you could do is talk with other collectors, because then you're exposed to, or you see some of these other great pieces. Like the pieces you were, you know, I was fortunate enough to see that you were gracious enough to share with me. I was like, oh my Lord.
Yeah, like Blancpain, Arnold and Son, directions you might not have thought of.
Correct. So where I was thinking maybe my next piece might be a Panerai or maybe a Blancpain, now FP Journe, or I'm like, interesting. I wonder, let me
like
do
these little indie brands.
Correct. Or also the one-off. So let me see what that journey takes. And that's the nice thing about any type of collecting, whether it be my cars that I've had or motorcycles that I had. It's always like the fun is, you know, life is short.
Yeah.
Life is short. So if the joy is cars, or the joy is motorcycles, or the joy is watches, now it's really hard on the watches. And every time I look at that dial, hundreds of times a day, I'm reminded of that piece that I bought and why I bought it. Whether it be the dial texture, the sweeping hand, the story behind it, my dad's story behind it, legibility, it all just, it brings me joy, brings me happiness.
That's very cool. So I think if there's a lesson to take away here today, it's you're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
Don't give up on watches because you do. Do a lot of research because A, the thrill is in the chase.
Yeah.
And B, you're more likely to be happy with the quarry once you corner it. And then maybe C, if you spent that much time searching for a watch, the moment you put it on your wrist, you've already got that story and those memories behind it.
Yes.
From day one.
Yes, and each watch has a story, and there are many more that I didn't bring, that some of you have more compelling stories on the why, the what, whatever. And with each watch is a little bit of, you know, it has sentimental meaning at some point. And I think that's probably why a lot of collectors do get started in watches, because they mark milestones, you know, whether it be the college or whether an advanced degree or what have you, a promotion for a job. And each one of them is kind of sentimental. And that's what kind of lured me in.
All those other watches, that sounds like a part two. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.